Yesterday, everyone on Fox News was flailing like Mariah Carey on New Year's Eve. Everyone. Well, everyone except for one man, SpongeBob SquareHead.
Imagine if the president today brought up the Second Amendment. How would the news media in this country have reacted? There were a lot of people that raced immediately to, let's talk about guns. I've always been a believer that you got to prepare to defend yourself. And I had gun permits in New York and Rhode Island and California and Alabama and Georgia in my life. And I was trained in the use of a firearm by my parents that had connections to law enforcement.
What does that mean? I was trained in the use of a firearm by my parents that had connections to law enforcement. The world doesn't work like that. Like if someone's sick on a plane, no one screams, "Does anyone have a cousin who watched Grey's Anatomy? Anyone?" But according to Sean Hannity, what rarely stops a bad guy with a gun is a Sean Hannity with a gun.
This guy's got a machine gun. Okay, how are they going to take him on without a weapon? Or if it's happening within a crowd, if you're in San Bernardino, do you want Sean Hannity, who's trained in the safety and use of a firearm in that room, so when they drop the clip and they start to reload, you got a shot, you got a chance?
Okay, Sean, you answered your own question. The shooter was 400 yards away in a hotel room 32 floors up. But you're like, yeah, but if he was down on the ground and close to me and was out of bullets, then I might have a chance to shoot him down. That's like saying if Tyra Banks had no money and I had all the money and she was like really hungry, I might have a chance. It's not reality. Hannity's fantasy was so ridiculous that even his Fox colleague couldn't get on board.
Do you want Sean Hannity, who's trained in the safety and use of a firearm in that room, so when they drop the clip and they start to reload, you got a shot, you got a chance?
Yeah, it wouldn't have done much good on the Mandalay 32nd floor unless you had a high-powered rifle to take him out. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, Sean, you made absolutely no sense, but your point is well taken. Yeah. You know she's thinking, dude, you couldn't even protect women from being sexually harassed in your own building, and now you're Batman? Calm down, man. Calm down. I'm not gonna lie, he may seem crazy, but after watching that, I wish Sean Hannity would start his own security service.
In a dangerous world, if you need protection, then you need Sean Hannity's private security services. Sean Hannity is trained in kicking ass, throwing footballs indoors, and wearing his hat backwards. So when the crap hits the fan, Hannity's your man.
Do you want Sean Hannity, who's trained in the safety and use of a firearm in that room, so when they drop the clip and they start to reload, you got a shot, you got a chance?
If you're threatened by a shooter who is in the room and has run out of bullets, then you've got a chance. Sean Hannity's private security services. Total protection in very specific circumstances.
It came out last week that Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, who is now in deep federal investigation shit, only had 3 clients in the past year. Right? The president, who Cohen helped to pay off a porn star that he had an affair with. His second client, a major GOP fundraiser named Elliot Broidy, who Cohen also helped to pay off a playmate that he had an affair with. Right? And then Michael Cohen had one more client. Right? Out of 7 billion people, who could have wanted to join this club and use Michael Cohen as a lawyer last year? Only one other person did. And this person's identity was a complete mystery until today.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We are now getting word the lawyer for the president, Michael Cohen, has just disclosed in court that the client who had requested to remain unnamed was Sean Hannity of Fox News.
Thank you. Yeah, it turns out Michael Cohen's secret client was Sean Hannity, which, I'm sorry, is not a good look. You know, right now, Sean Hannity's probably on the phone with his wife, like, hey, honey, it's so weird how I use the guy who pays off mistresses to get me out of that parking ticket. It's funny, right? Hello? Just think about how unethical this is for a moment, right? Hannity has been reporting on this Michael Cohen story from the beginning. But he conveniently never mentioned that Cohen was his guy, which even for Sean Hannity is pretty shady. I mean, even Instagram models have higher ethical standards. Because they'll be like, drink tummy tea. By the way, I'm sponsored by tummy tea. They tell you what it is, right? And I'm not expecting him to aspire to the levels of the Kardashians, but come on, Sean. And I'll tell you what else. Once you know that Hannity has personal skin in the game, like with Cohen, it's fun to go back and look at everything he said about the FBI raid, because now we can see that Hannity wasn't just mad, he was scared.
President Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen, just had his office, his home, and his hotel that he was staying in raided by the FBI today. This is an unprecedented abuse of power. Cohen's payment is a perfectly legitimate business move. Mueller's witch hunt investigation is now a runaway train careening off the track, spinning out of control. If you voted for Donald Trump, you better get buckled up, because this is going to be a rough ride.
You know, now that we know he was working with Cohen, that looks less like a news show and more like a guy really stressed giving himself a pep talk. It's just like, come on, we gotta get buckled up. This is gonna be a rough ride. Hoo-ha! Obviously, everyone thought that Hannity being busted was hilarious. I mean, other news networks were laughing, late-night hosts, school children, creatures of the sea. And in a year that's so divisive, it turned out embarrassing Sean Hannity is the one thing truly everyone can enjoy.
Good night from Washington. No one else is talking about Sean Hannity today, but he's here anyway. We're really glad to see him. Hey,
Is
Sean.
there any news? Anything happening? All right, thanks, Tucker.
I'm just say this. You're like my brother, but I'm glad for like a millisecond the heat's off me and on you. Okay, so I'm feeling.
I appreciate that.
You know, it says a lot about your news network when all of your top anchors are playing scandal tag. It's like, I made fun of the Parkland kids. Tag, you're it. I'm out. Thank God. Now, even though yesterday might have sucked for Hannity, it helped his ratings because everyone tuned in to see what creative excuse he'd come up with to explain his Michael Cohen relationship. And the answer was, it's complicated.
Let me set the record straight. Here's the truth. Michael Cohen never represented me in any legal matter. I never retained his services. I never received an invoice. I never paid Michael Cohen for legal fees. I did have occasional brief conversations with Michael Cohen. He's a great attorney about legal questions I had, or I was looking for input and perspective.
He wasn't your lawyer. He just answered your legal questions. How do you not know the definition of lawyer when your head is shaped like a dictionary? How do you not know this? Seriously, giving legal inputs and perspective is exactly what a lawyer does. Hannity might as well have come out and said, he was just my lawyer, but just a tip, guys, just a tip. Now, what people are really wondering is this. Whatever legal advice was, why didn't Hannity get it from his regular attorney? Right? Instead of turning to a guy who's specifically known for paying off mistresses. Why did he go to him? But according to Hannity, baby, this is not what it looks like.
To be absolutely clear, they never involved any matter, sorry to disappoint so many, matter between me or third party, a third group at all. And my questions exclusively almost focused on real estate.
Wow, he really slipped in the almost. Did you hear it? Yeah, it was super quick. He was like, all my questions to Michael Cohen were exclusively almost real estate. Exclusively almost. Exclusively almost. Yeah, he sounds like the voice at the end of those medical ads. Zernax is exclusively almost side effect free. Exclusively almost. You can't say exclusively almost. Exclusively almost is the kind of phrase that makes people ask more questions. If someone tells you that they exclusively almost have sex with adults, you're not hiring them to babysit your kids. That's not what you're thinking of right now. But okay, fine. Hannity claims he was just getting some informal real estate advice from Michael Cohen, which makes what he said a few hours earlier on his radio show all the more confusing.
I never gave him a retainer, never received an invoice, never paid any fees. You know, I might have handed him $10. I definitely want you attorney-client privilege on this, something like that.
Okay, whoa. Okay, wait. So he's not your lawyer. All you had was a few chit-chats about real estate. But you definitely want attorney-client privilege. Yeah, you definitely want that. What the f*** did you bury under that house? No, I'm just saying, I've had a lot of conversations about real estate. At the end of it, I never went, this never happened. And you know what gets me is how casually Hannity is trying to minimize his connection to Michael Cohen, like it means nothing. Especially when every other day of the year, He's the guy who can bake a conspiracy cake out of nothing more than an egg and the word Hillary.
Let's talk about a family responsible for actual crimes. We'll call it the head of the notorious political cabal. Of course, Bill and Hillary Clinton, the Clinton crime family. If we're going to go to crime families, let's look at the Mueller crime family. And, well, this is near and dear to Comey's heart. We'll call it the Comey crime family.
I like how Hannity puts a question mark at the end of each one just to cover his ass. He's like, I didn't say Mueller runs a crime family. I just said Mueller runs a crime family. Well, you know what, folks? I have a theory of my own. And I honestly think that it's going to bust this whole Hannity-Michael Cohen story wide open. Get ready to have your minds blown. Because I believe I've uncovered a complex criminal network. My theory is that Sean Hannity is a client of Michael Cohen. Look, we may never know the true nature of Hannity and Cohen's relationship, but what we do know is that as someone is discussing Cohen and his case on the air, Hannity should have been more transparent, right? He should have said something about it. In fact, what Hannity did was so shady. Even when he tried to talk about other things on his show, his own guests had to call him out. And please, do enjoy.
A foreign national using Russian sources of all things to get it. Is that a crime in Alan Dershowitz's book?
Well, first of all, Sean, I do want to say that I really think that you should have disclosed your relationship with Cohen when you talked about him on this show. I think it would have been much, much better had you disclosed that relationship. You were in a difficult situation,
Do you understand
obviously.
the nature of it, Professor? I'm going to deal with this later in the show.
No, I understand.
It was minimal. I put out a statement about it.
You should have said that, and that would have been fair to say that it was minimal.
That's fine.
You had the right, by the way, not to have your identity
I have the right to
revealed.
privacy.
Right.
I do.
But, you know, it's a complex situation when you're speaking to millions of people.
Professor, it was such a minor relationship in terms of...
You should have said that.
You should have said that. You should have said that. You should have said that. That was priceless. And keep in mind, this guy, Alan Dershowitz, he isn't a hater, right? He's been a vocal defender of President Trump and a frequent guest on Hannity's show. Like, that's how you know that this is bad for Hannity. He's getting called out by someone on his own team. You know what this reminded me of? It reminded me of that one deleted scene from Star Wars when the stormtroopers called out their boss.
Now we can finally destroy the rebels.
Sir, real quick. We all think you should have disclosed your relationship with Luke Skywalker.
What? I barely know the guy. He's not even my son. It's more like a baby mama thing.
Sir, you should have told us.
This isn't a big deal. I have a right to privacy.
If it wasn't a big deal, why didn't he tell us? What a dick.
Yeah, it's true. That scene was exclusively almost from Star Wars. We're learning things about what President Trump does before bed at night, and it's even worse than you think.
This week's New York Magazine reports that Trump and the Fox News host Sean Hannity speak on the phone most weeknights. The report also quotes a former White House official who says Hannity and Fox create a feedback loop that puts Trump in a, quote, weird headspace, adding, quote, what ends up happening is Judge Jeanine Pirro or Hannity fill him up with a bunch of crazy expletive, and everyone on staff has to go and knock down all the expletive fires they started.
Okay, you have to admit, it's cute that these two talk before bed every night. Yeah, they're like 8-year-old treehouse buddies with those cans on strings, you know, gossiping about which girls they secretly paid off, you know, or whether it's Yanni or Laurel. It's Laurel, by the way. But that feedback loop part is really weird for me, right? They're saying that President Trump says something outlandish to Hannity on the phone. Hannity then repeats it on TV, and then Trump watches that and goes, you see, exactly, that's what I was saying! Trump is like that gorilla getting riled up by what he's doing in the mirror. He's like, you see what he did? And here's my favorite part of this story. White House staff know that the calls happen thanks to the president entering a room and announcing, I just hung up with Hannity, or even ringing Hannity up from his desk in their presence. How are you both the president and a star f***er. How? Like, no other world leader does that, you realize it. Putin's never talking to his assistant like, not a big deal, but I was at party with actor who plays Sheldon on Big Bang. Yeah. Yeah, Elon Musk and Grimes there too, just saying. Yeah, yeah.